Today I shall be teaching you about the role of community psychologists. After I finish my lecture, you will know the kind of work that community psychologists do, the various hats that they don, and the various roles and the importance of those roles in community psychology. Let me begin by giving you an introduction. Community psychology is the branch of psychology concerned with people, environment interactions, and the way society affects individual and community functioning. It concerns the relation of the individual to communities and societies. The term community psychology was born in the Boston Conference in 1965. Community psychology is fundamentally concerned with the relationship between the social systems and the individual well-being in the community context. It is centered in action and in solving problems. It is also devoted to understanding of the social issues which cause these problems. Community psychology takes a holistic systems-based approach to understanding behavior and how people fit into society. Let me give you a history of community psychology. Community psychology began to emerge during the 1960s as a growing group of psychologists became dissatisfied with the ability of clinical psychology to address broader social issues. Today, many recognize a 1965 meeting of psychologists at the Swampscott Conference as the official beginning of the contemporary community psychology. At this meeting, those in attendance concluded that psychology needed to take a greater focus on the community and the social change in order to address mental health and well-being. Since that time, the field has continued to grow. Division 27 of the American Psychological Association and Action, SCRA, is devoted to the subject of community psychology. Several academic journals are also devoted to this topic. Some of them are the American Journal of Community Psychology and the Journal of Community Psychology, Journal of Community and Applied Social Psychology. Let's move on to community psychology at work. Some things that a community psychologist might do include: 1. Finding ways to help the disadvantaged or disenfranchised individuals feel more connected with their local communities. They may also understand the social issues among minority groups. Community psychologists also help in developing, implementing, and evaluating action-oriented community-based programs. They also help in building relationships between the individuals and the community groups. They might also be evaluating organizations, governments, and communities in order to promote participation and diversity. Community psychologists can be employed in a number of areas, including education, government, non-profit groups, community organizations, and private counseling. Within the educational system, community psychologists often work at colleges and universities to teach courses and conduct original research. In the government setting, they may work in health and human services for the local, state, and federal governments. Now I shall tell you about community psychology and the related fields. People sometimes confuse community psychology with other related fields like social work or cross-cultural psychology and social psychology. While community psychology has many similarities to other related fields and often draws upon those disciplines, it is important to note some major distinctions. For example, community psychology is centered on action and solving problems, much like clinical psychology. However, clinical psychology tends to have a greater focus on solving individual problems, while community psychology is devoted to understanding the underlying social issues that contribute to those problems. Community psychology also takes a holistic, system based approach to understanding behavior and how people fit into society, much like related fields of sociology and social psychology. Community psychology tends to be more centered on applying psychological and social knowledge to solving problems, creating real world solutions, and taking immediate action. Like public health and mental health counseling, community psychology is also focused on prevention of problems and the promotion of health and well-being. It is also having a very strong research-oriented component. Community psychologists often perform original research, develop theoretical frameworks, and then apply this knowledge directly within the public and private communities. As you might have noted, community psychology overlaps with a number of other disciplines. However, it has its own unique and important contributions to make. The major goal of this field is to create new ways to empower people within their communities. The other goals are to promote social change and diversity, promote individual and community well-being, and prevent disorder. What are the training and educational requirements of a community psychologist? Most community psychologists hold at least a master's or a doctorate degree in psychology. There are many community psychology programs available, but other students opt to earn an interdisciplinary degree or a general degree with a focus on community psychology topics. Some of the coursework that an aspiring community psychologist should take include social behavior, research methods, statistics, public health, organizational development, grant writing, developing prevention programs, developmental psychology, sociology, social problems, and community development. Training and education in community psychology focuses on both research and application. Graduate students receive extensive training in research methods and social statistics, as well as how to put this information to practical use through developing action-oriented community programs. According to James G. Kelly, it is important that community psychologists exhibit several important qualities. First, it is important for these professionals to become part of the communities that they are trying to change. Community psychologists must also embrace diversity, since their work places them in close contact with people from all walks of life. Finally, community psychologists must be prepared to face challenges and deal with limited resources. In order to effect changes in a community, these professionals often have to make the best of what is available and seek out new ways to gain assistance and build partnerships within the community. Moving on to the role of community psychologists. Community psychologists have multiple functions and roles to play. Unlike clinical psychologists who focus only on solving the problem of the client, community psychologists go a step further in finding out social issues which cause these problems. They follow a holistic systems-based approach in understanding behavior and how people fit into a society. The role of community psychologists is very important and critical because they directly affect the people living in a community. The various roles or functions of a community psychologist are: number one, assessing the needs of the community. What are needs? Needs can be defined as the gap between what is and what should be. A need can be felt by an individual, a group, or an entire community. It can be as concrete as the need for food and water, or as abstract as improved community cohesiveness. An obvious example might be the need for public transportation in a community where older adults have no means of getting around the town. Now, more important to these same adults, however, might be the need to be valued for their knowledge and experience. Examining situations closely helps uncover what is truly needed and leads towards future improvement. A community psychologist has to find out what needs exist in the community and whether adequate services exist which can fulfill these needs. In case there are not adequate services available, then community psychologists provide cost-effective services to the people of the community and also increase the access to resources which fulfill these needs. Let me give you an example here. Providing medicines to the poor and providing regular health checkups. Often community psychologists are responsible for identifying certain groups in a community which are at a high risk for developing a disorder and then facilitating the delivery of services to these groups. The question arises, who should be involved in developing a plan for assessing local needs and resources? Those experiencing needs that should be addressed, it's both fair and logical to involve those who are most directly affected by adverse conditions. They know best what effects those conditions have on their lives, and including them in the planning process is more likely to produce a plan that actually addresses their needs. Health and human service providers could be the next group. These individuals and organizations, especially those that are community based, often have both a deep understanding of the community and a strong empathic connection with the populations they serve. They can be helpful both by sharing their knowledge and by recruiting people from marginalized populations to contribute to the assessment. Next is government officials. Elected and appointed officials are often those who can help or hinder a community change effort. Engaging them in planning and carrying out an assessment helps to ensure that they will take the effort seriously and work to make it successful. Another set could be influential people. These can include individuals who are identified as leaders because of their positions. For example, the college presidents, directors of hospitals and other major organizations, corporate CEOs because of the prestige of their professions, doctors, professors, judges, clergy, or because they are known to the people to be somebody who are intelligent, who have integrity and goodwill, and they would like to take care about the community. Next is people whose jobs or lives could be affected by the eventual action taken as a result of assessment. These could include teachers, police, emergency room personnel, landlords, and others who might have to react if new community policies or procedures are put in place. Another set of people could be community activists. people who have been involved in addressing policy or issues that could come up in the course of the assessment have a stake at planning the assessment as well. The next set would be businesses, especially those who employ people from the populations concerned. The livelihood of local business owners could be affected by the results of the assessment, and so could be the lives of their employees. Next, we will talk about solving problems using behavioral techniques. Behavioral approaches are significant in pointing out deficits, skills in individuals and implementing programs which aim at change toward requisite learning. Now, assessment for the acquired skills takes place along with attainment of goals. The next set of roles is developing programs on human service. Community psychologists feel that the problems caused to the people are a result of the ineffective functioning of a society that they live in. Community psychologists aim at developing human resources and delivering services to those in need. They also aim at integration of the person with the environment and minimizing their dependence on the treatment system. Let me quote an example here. In the lower economic families, a husband beating a wife is considered as a normal activity. A community psychologist has to provide education on domestic violence and women empowerment to these ladies and develop a women's cell in that area, which provides help to women who are victims of domestic violence and which also provides opportunities to earn. Sometimes certain solutions are not accepted because they require changes in the traditional system. Such change is resisted. Another important role is prevention of problems. A community psychologist aims at preventing the onset of a problem. Community psychologists work toward the prevention of the original occurrence of a problem so that the problem of rehabilitation does not arise. Like, for example, providing polio drops to children below age 5 or providing water sanitation so that waterborne diseases do not arise in the first place. Another set of roles which are very important are building competencies. Community psychologists believe that people living in a community must have control over their lives. They should not be passive recipients but active participants in the decision making process which concerns the problems of the community. Community psychologists aim at empowering people. They value human differences and are committed to core principles of flexibility, equity, and respect for cultural diversity in meeting the needs of different communities. This focus is sometimes seen as a method of primary prevention. Some suggest that enhancement of positive qualities of life, such as being able to control it and finding satisfaction in life tasks, is in itself a goal for community psychologists. Community psychologists also develop competencies in the environment. For example, including people with disability in the work environment can be very helpful. Here we can also talk about core competencies, which include building community infrastructure, developing, nurturing and sustaining organizations and communities by enhancing their abilities to achieve the common good through convening groups to address issues, training and technical assistance and leadership development. Another could be mobilizing resources, identifying and filling gaps in community service by redefining of existing or development of new resources. Moving on to research and evaluation. Producing and sharing credible and meaningful community-based research and program evaluation that informs and influences health and social policy and practice. Next is public policy analysis. Producing timely, valuable and accurate information on policy choices for use by citizens and policymakers in developing solutions for community problems. Next is community organizing. Helping people and organizations most affected by public policies, services or community conditions develop and carry out activities that build community and neighborhood capacity and enhance health, economic conditions and social well-being. The next set could be advocacy. Engaging people in use of effective approaches to influence policymakers, opinion leaders and general public in decisions benefiting the overall community's quality of life. Another set of roles could be information services. Producing and disseminating timely, accurate information for health and human services planning, fund distribution, policy development and services referral. The next is facilitation. Creating a safe, unaligned environment for the resolution of community problems and engaging multiple community sectors in addressing identified community issues. Apart from all these activities that I have mentioned, community psychologists also act as consultants, where they influence people who are in direct contact with the patient. Community psychologists provide consulting services to teachers, doctors, nurses or parents. These people who are in direct contact with the patient. They also act as trainers. They even provide writers to program and policy developers. They might also coordinate programs aimed at community development. Sometimes they conduct community focused psychosocial research, conduct community consultation to inform public policy development, enhance engagement and collaboration within a diverse community, educate staff in community consultation skills, provide counseling and advocacy for individuals and groups, negotiate and mediate to manage and resolve conflict, develop, facilitate and evaluate group-based intervention and educational programs, develop and conduct health promotion and education programs, and promote and manage attitudinal and behavioral social change in individuals, systems, organizations and communities. Now, how to become a community psychologist and don one of the many hats that they don? Community psychologists work to solve community problems. Now, we all know there are working consistently in the community either as consultants or experts, but there are basically two main types of community psychologists. Number one are the clinical community psychologists, who are mental health providers who work in the community settings, generally the public sector. They are qualified to provide mental health services directly. Their patients may be individuals who have few resources and or are not well integrated into the larger society. Community psychologists may develop programs or evaluate the existing ones. They may carry out research. Community psychologists may focus on particular populations, for example, the rural populations or the elderly. The next step is the non-clinical community psychologists who do not treat individual patients. Instead, they work on affecting change on a macro level. Social psychology and social actions are often entwined. One resource is the American Psychological Association's Society for Community Research and Action, Division 27, community psychology. Division 27 interest groups include the following: rural psychology, aging, community psychology in applied setting, children and youth, international community psychology, and then prevention. Let me summarize what I have taught you. Community psychologists have multiple roles. They conduct community focused psychosocial research. They assess the psychosocial needs of the individuals, groups, organizations, and residential communities. They conduct community consultation to inform and influence public policy development. They enhance engagement and collaboration within a diverse community. They evaluate the processes and outcomes of community programs that address many psychosocial needs of the community members. They coordinate systems to manage projects, educate staff in community consultation skills, provide counseling and advocacy for individuals and groups, negotiate and mediate to manage and resolve conflict, develop, facilitate and evaluate group-based intervention and education programs, develop and conduct health promotion and education programs, promote and manage attitudinal and behavioral social change in individuals, systems, organizations and communities.